Good lord, I have no idea what the hell would have caused that, because I changed functionally nothing outside of that restart. So that
Yeah,
really
right?
has me questioning what the hell is going on.
Things like that happen. It's alright, hopefully.
Anyhow, give
Mm-mm-mm-mm.
me a moment just to see if the
Yeah.
stream itself is functioning properly. Because, yeah, if the stream's audio is now functioning properly, then we're golden. Itself is
Mm-mm-mm. Yeah,
functioning
hopefully
properly.
people can hear me.
Because, yeah,
Works.
if the stream's audio is now functioning properly,
Yeah.
then we're golden. Itself is
Mm-mm-mm.
functioning.
Yeah, hopefully people can hear me.
Okay, you're audible now.
Okay. Oh, what? Whew, phew, oh,
My
oh, it
god.
works. Phew, phew, thank goodness. Oh,
Oh, that
hello. Oh,
is
we Gucci now. I know, right?
that is
Hello, guys.
pain.
I know,
Okay,
right? All right. Round three.
yes,
Third time's the
third
charm,
time's a
right?
charm. Yeah,
Yeah,
go for it.
as they always say. All right, third time's the charm of introducing myself. Okay, so yeah, I'm Miyukiko, also known as Miyu, most commonly known as Miyu, and yeah, I work as a professional illustrator. I've worked from things ranging from video games, whether it is for companies or in indies now that I'm freelance, and also things like webtoons, been in zines, done a little self-publishing, done art conventions. What else have I done? I've also used to. My first job was actually a storyboard artist, so I worked as a storyboard artist for a bit, and then I worked I teach uni, so I'm a uni lecturer for game design, and used to teach for visual communication, so it's more on the graphic, video editing, animation, all sorts of that kind of stuff. And I tutor people for all ages for just drawing in general, because Australia doesn't really have a strong teaching thing for art foundations or technical. It's more like fine artsy and like all that kind of thing, right? So I kind of provide that kind of service as well. Then I do commissions, and now I'm doing a lot more VTuber related stuff and commissions, and yeah, really enjoying that. So that's a little speed run, speed run introduction.
I will say, for a speedrun introduction, that is the longest introduction I've had so far on these
Yeah, because
interviews.
it's hard.
Actually,
It's
yeah.
always really hard to kind of like summarize. When people are like, "How do you introduce yourself?" I'm like, I guess I'm just an artist that draws pretty boys. I think like we're like.
Because, yeah, the funny thing was, the previous interview I had was actually a case of a very, very succinct introduction that I had nothing to bite onto afterwards.
Really?
Yeah.
I always give more information so then people can like pick and choose like what to ask them as well, because I know being like a conversationalist, if it's kind of like, "How are you?" Good. It's like, and go for it, right? Yeah.
Because, yeah, the last person I had introduced themselves as, "Oh, yes, I'm just a normal human being." I'm just like, eh?
Thank you. Aren't we all? I hope.
Because, yeah, every other person which has come on has
Yeah.
introduced themselves more or less either as some kind of variety streamer, some kind of artist, or just some fantastical
Oh yeah.
thingamajig as
Oh yeah. I'm
as
a
is with the
VTuber
VTube
artist
scene.
now. I'm a VTuber artist streamer too. What?
But yeah,
Yeah.
as it happens, anyhow.
Yeah.
That last one though was the sheer exception of just, oh yeah, I'm a regular human being. I'm like, huh? Hold up. Yeah, and now
Well,
there's
it's
your
good to know.
case, which is the very,
10
very
million
long
things.
intro.
10 million things.
The,
The story of my life.
the
It's
I've
like,
been, yeah, the I've been
yeah.
everywhere, man.
Yeah. It's like
Essentially.
this industry, I've been through it. It's also because, if you don't try, you don't know if it suits you as well.
Oh yeah,
Sometimes
yeah.
you like something and you think you like something, but then you realize like, oh, hang on, maybe I didn't like this as much as I thought. Or like you find stuff that are better suited, and then things change over time as well. So
Like for myself, if I were to go over a full introduction myself, it would actually be nearly as ridiculous, honestly. But
fun that way, isn't it?
nowhere near as focused, I will say. Because yours still floats around the arts, at least.
It is, yes.
Mine goes through hospitality, volunteering, into radio, into game dev, into writing, into God knows where at this point. But yeah.
Nah, but like all those kind of skills would help you as well in all sorts of different areas. So
Yeah, yeah. In the long
yeah.
run, it does help out a lot, especially with game dev, because at that point, you do wear a lot of hats. You do
Ah,
have to
yes.
sit in a lot of fields and know how to integrate the rest of the fields, or else you're kind of screwed.
That's true. That's true. I guess it's yeah, like we said before, like with the creative field, you kind of have to wear a bit of multiple hats. It's hard to just be like focused on one thing.
Alright, in which case, you know, let's go all the way back to the start for your art career. What exactly got you
Awesome.
started with art?
So what got me interested in drawing in general?
Yeah, yeah.
That kind of thing. It was actually despite how like I was a very good kid, I was actually you know how you have a secret rebellious streak? Like you do things the proper way, but secretly you're like, in 10 years I'm gonna do this kind of thing. Right? Like I was that kid. So I started. I've always liked art, but I wasn't good at it. So I always admired looking at people like draw, and I'll be like, "Oh my god, they draw so good!" Like as people do, right? Because
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
really amazing. Like drawing is an amazing skill. Same with like say like creative stuff, like musicians and other stuff like that. It's like amazing when you hear something that's good. And so I was just mostly sketching and doodling for hobby and drawing, like every now and then. Not really seriously into it. But what really got me into it was actually when my family made fun of my art.
Oh, okay.
So it was like my being an Asian family, they make jokes out of everything, right? Like
Yeah.
everything's laughable, right? So even though I knew that, it kind of just made me like, well, in one day I'll become like in this is me as a kid, like you had that Lelouch moment. It's kind of like one day, in 10 years later, you'll all be like saying how great my art is, or like you'll only have good things to say, kind of thing. So from that day forth, I kind of made a kind of like an oath to myself that like, I'm just gonna keep drawing and see where it leads me. And yeah, here I am.
Here you are, all
Yes,
those
here
years
I am.
later.
Yeah, I know, right? So that's a bit of a interesting backstory.
Very
Yeah.
interesting backstory, rather, because, yeah, I can't think of too many people that are quite that persistent when it comes to exacting vengeance over. Yeah. I mean,
So
I suppose I was one of them as well myself, but
yeah,
yeah.
kind of like makes you kind of like really work for it because you're kind of like gonna like show you kind of thing, right? Although there was a lot of ups and downs, and being the least talented one in from like of course when you have friends that draw in your age group online or anything, you kind of be like, well, I'm like the least good one out of the friends and everything. And it's kind of like, well, at that time you just have to. I just said like to myself, I just have to work twice as hard. So that probably explains why I juggle 10 million things. To the mentality from back then sticks to today.
Fair enough, fair
Yeah.
enough. So, let's move on to another one of these questions regarding, say, your preferences and biases when it comes to what you want to draw.
What I want to draw. I think like it also kind of changes over the years, right? Depending on your interests and everything's like that. Because um I find that I like looking at getting into like say like different fandoms and different things. You learn a lot from different art styles and such as well. So I like to learn a lot and then just kind of keep developing as well. But I do like a lot of like say pretty art in general, like pretty detailed, like intricate kind of art. Like I really like say art nouveau kind of like art styles as well. That kind of like composition, those kind of really pretty
Okay.
kind of things.
Yep.
Yeah. And I try to get inspiration from a lot of not to say the current trends, not to say trends are a bad thing, but I feel like people follow a trend and everyone starts looking the same, right? For example, like anime, like in like 10 years ago, everyone drew like everything was looking the same, like all the moe stuff looked the same, right? It's kind of like that. Everything looks the same. And
Yeah.
for me, when that kind of happens, I try to get more influence of other things that may be a bit dated, but also it's still really good or like it aged really well. Like, for example, what would be a good example? Like I get a lot of ideas from manga in like 10 to 15 years ago, right? For example, what is it? Let me look at my bookshelf. What do I have on my bookshelf? I'm just like eyeing my bookshelf. Well, D Man is one of them, but the art style also changes,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
throughout the time, but it has its unique kind of style as well. But other examples are like, say, it's very old, but like Yami no Mate, like Descendants of Darkness, like those kind of things. It's or like Angel Sanctuary, by Kaori Yuki, like those kind of art styles, which is very unique and very like strong back then. Like it's kind of like lost now because it's a bit like edgelordy now. But you know what? Like those high contrast, highly detailed,
Yeah.
like all that kind of thing. But I really like those kind of art styles. I don't really see that kind of thing being emulated as much today. If they do, it's or have that kind of thing. It's a very different vibe. So the other day when people came to my stream and was reading my comics and my original comics, they were saying like, "Oh, it reminds you of like the 2000s manga and things like that." I'm like, "Thank you." Like
Yeah.
you don't really hear that. Like, and
Hmm.
and a lot of my influence were those kind of things. So it's really nice to see people recognize that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Fair enough, but man, Moe stuff was 10 years ago? Oh god.
You
Oh,
would be right because
yeah,
like say like
yeah.
K-On! And stuff like that, right?
Yeah, oh god, K-On! Was like 11 years ago now. Oh
Oh,
man.
really? K was so big. Like that era
Yeah.
of Moe stuff was so big. I couldn't wait until that wave went over because I'm not very good at drawing Moe stuff. So yeah.
Man, yeah. I mean, we're now sitting in like an isekai era instead of Moe, purely.
Oh, I'm not huge on isekai either. So those it kind of like leading on to the past 10 years. I had like nothing to watch.
Oh man.
But these 2 years, it feels like there's a bit more variety. I find that I'm watching stuff a lot more this past year.
Yeah, likewise, because just in the previous season, I picked up like 8 or 9 shows where I'd normally pick up like 3 at most, and I was
Oh yeah, same. Yeah,
because there was a lot of unique stuff this season, and I was like,
definitely. I feel like the variety has gotten a lot better rather than just following one trend and run with it.
Speaking of trends, right. One other thing which caught my eye when it came to you was you also did cosplay, and one thing I noticed at a lot of cons is there's usually quite a few trends there as well when it comes to cosplay for that particular year or whatnot.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, cosplay. Oh, yes. I think I'm not as prevalent in the cosplay area as I used to be. I have been cosplaying for like 15 years or so I'm a little bit
Ooh.
of like OG. So people who've been around, like say the past 5 to 10 years, most people would probably know of me, but not probably like these years because the direction of cosplay has changed a lot. And yeah, it's a very different vibe. Not something that I probably because I've gotten a lot older as well. So it's just like the feeling, the vibe, and the people that you meet has changed a lot. So now that I'm just more of a like casual, really, but yeah. But I really did have a very strong cosplay phase to the point where like I used to make all my costumes back when I was younger.
Oh damn!
And I used to
Alright.
make like one costume like a month, and I don't know how I do it because I can barely make one now because I'm so busy. Like, and I'm just like, do I still remember how to sew? I'm not sure, but yeah. And for me, yeah, cosplay trends are another scary thing as well because nowadays they change so fast, like with fandoms and things in general. And now, because maybe I've done it for so many years, then I feel tired just trying to be like catch up to like this season's cosplay trend kind of thing, right? And it moves too fast. And after this season, it's kind of like no one cares unless you do it during that time. And it's just like not the kind of thing that I'm really into. So nowadays, I'm just going back to like the things I really like, or like even the old ones, or revisiting really old series, which will get me nowhere, but I enjoy it. And I think that's the nature of cosplay. You just do and cosplay what you want, right? So yeah.
Just go ahead with something that you enjoy rather than running along with the trend, because holy
Yeah.
hell, yeah, that does
Yeah.
flick on really fast with the trends.
It does. I mean, it all happens with art, and I'm like, I don't want that to do with art and cosplay. Otherwise, it's just tiring. Yeah.
Okay,
But it's
let's
also
see.
a great way to make friends as well. So
Alright, I'll throw the first curveball I've got here. I'm not quite sure how to word this in such a way that I'll get it across too clearly, but I'll give it a shot anyhow.
Awesome.
So, yeah, regarding art and whatnot, how do you feel about people that specifically do fan art compared to people that do original works?
Ah, right. So it's really that's an interesting topic as well because when I first really got into drawings, I kind of did both. Probably about like 40% original and 60% fan art, but nowadays it's more like 90% fan art and then 10% originals, and not including the things I do for like work and other stuff like that, right? But yeah, it's a very different vibes, and I feel like both of have, like with anything, they both have their positives and negatives. I feel like original, it's still your kind of thing. So no matter what, you're gonna grow attached to it and kind of work towards that. And no, nothing can change it. It's kind of like it's forever yours, right?
Yep.
And yeah, and I mean, me having my own original characters and original work, it's great to have that as like just part of your, I don't know, part of who you are, because you can rightfully say like, oh, this is mine. I have something to show people, not just like fan art and other stuff like that. And for fan art, also why I enjoy drawing it for so much and why that kind of took over, for like the ratio kind of took over a lot, is not just because one, it helps build like the audience, builds like people who have the same tastes, because people generally like the same kind of thing, right? Similar series, similar vibe, or similar pairings or whatever.
Yep.
So you kind of make friends or like make that kind of community a lot easier. For example, because I draw a lot of D-Gray man, but sometimes when I see like people like my D-Gray art, I'm like, oh, I see this number 6 icon. Oh, I see this K project icon. I see this, like people like the same kind of things, right? And I'm like, yes, you're one of us kind of thing, right?
Oh, boy.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of like that, building up that like same interest, same kind of thing, and it's nice to know that there are people who are interested and like the same things as you do. And it's also a good way to kind of start off as an artist. And I know that some original artists who do mostly original are really put off by that, because they're like, oh, I have to get, maybe their mindset is like, oh, I have to be draw fan art to be popular, right? But I think it's just the mindset, right? Because sometimes, sure, that you can just draw things that you're a fan of, but then people, if you do your original stuff has that same kind of vibe, or like you don't gravitate too far from it, people are still going to be interested in your works. It's just like an extra kind of thing to kind of grab people's eye, because it's hard to grab people's like investment in things if they don't really know anything about it yet, right? And there's just so much out there, whether it be webtoons and all sorts of things like that. So by saying like, oh, this person also draws this fan art, it's kind of like, oh yeah, they like this kind of stuff. Oh, maybe their original works or like their comics has a similar vibe, or like maybe they like this kind of story or something as well. And you get interested in person because you kind of have a feel for their tastes. So I feel like in a way, it kind of a way to get to know people better that way. And also, another thing I like about fan arts is that by drawing them, you learn a lot. You end up analyzing other people's arts a lot as well.
Okay.
Like you adopt a lot of art styles or traits that you pick up. For example, a lot of my favorite artists, manga artists, or games, for example, I really love Grand Fantasy, and I picked up a lot of drawing, kind of like how to improve my own drawing through like GBF, like because my art was more sketchy or like more detailed, and then I see like how they do it, and I'm like, oh, I can incorporate those kind of elements as well in my own work. So it actually forces you to study and break down those kind of drawings to see what may work, because you feel familiarity in that kind of art style. Because my art style is more detailed, like Grand Blue or like D-Gray, then I can pick up and learn from those kind of artists because there's a familiarity with it. That's how I feel about fan arts and why I enjoy it. Of course, sometimes if you draw too much fan art, you kind of lose a sight of what your own art style is, or like where you kind of head, and that's something to kind of balance as well. Yeah, and some people, some people kind of do really well just be like a copycat kind of art styles, like imitations and things like that. But of course, for me, I'm not really into that. For me, I just kind of take the things that I like about an art style and kind of develop it and work with my own and improve my own art. But, everyone has their own kind of way of working with that. Yeah.
When it comes to it, I'll say that your art stood out enough to the point where I was like, hang on a second, I've seen this somewhere before. Where have I seen this before?
I'm glad to hear that because I really don't know what is like that. I guess unique or interesting because it's not so crazy out there. You know how some people have that like very such out there art
Yeah.
that is like so like oh from a mile away, like you know like Picasso, you're like oh my god from a mile away you can tell, right? Like you know it's
Yeah,
kind of like
yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
But for me, I'm like oh it's detailed, it's pretty, but a lot of people draw like pretty detailed art. I'm like, is it? But yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess there are things that kind of stand out in its own way, and if it's so, that I'm really glad to hear about that.
Because I think it was a case of I tuned in on one of your streams. I'm like, Sydney based. Wait,
Yeah.
this seems very familiar. Hold up a second here. Looked into it and figured, had a slight inkling of a memory. Why
Yeah,
do I
yeah.
think I had this on a business card at some point? Dug around. Holy shit.
Ta-da!
I was like, oh no, not like this.
Not like this. Yeah. Well, I have been around for a while, so.
Yeah, that was just a case of just, oh my god, because I remember it was a friend at Smash one time. They were just they showed me a business card. I was like, oh, that's really pretty. Where'd you get that from? And it was like, oh yeah, they pointed over to the store. I was like, I went ahead and picked one up myself, and then yeah, I was like, heck, okay.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, man, but all right. Let's move into it then, in which case, let's hear about your creative process. So, from start of an illustration all the way to the end of it, how do you go about it?
I'm the type. Well, some people can just like. I actually envy people who can just sketch and just draw whatever and make an illustration, out of it. Because for me, it's very hard for me to kind of just run with it unless I have an idea or kind of like have a draft or like a set kind of thing in my head. I would just keep sketching and just kind of working on a sketch until you know like this looks good kind of thing. But if I don't have it, like nothing turns out like in my opinion, it's kind of like it just kind of like a bit like scuffed the drawings. So I tend to like to have an idea, like whether it could be like a creative like an idea behind the drawing, like metaphorically or whatever, or it could be a composition or like the kind of composition and colors I want to use. I'm like and I work with that. Yeah, so yeah, I usually don't have a composition. For example, if I'm the drawing that I've been sketching today is like just a half a body of like Griffith, right? Kind of have an idea of what kind of style I want to do because I'm like, oh, I don't want to do it color because Berserk is very black and white and intense, right? So I'm like, okay, I want to bring homage to that. So I just want to do, and also it's also quicker to do, right, than full color for something as detailed as Berserk. And yeah, so I kind of see like, okay, black and white style, and I know what kind of works with that kind of art style, especially for fan art. I kind of, well, it doesn't have to be fan art, but I try to see what art style or like art approach works to give that kind of vibe for an art. And I adjust accordingly. So I do that more commonly with fan arts because, for example, it's kind of like if this art is very pretty, I want to draw like very pretty, detailed, etc. But if it's like a chibi, for example, like then I would simplify, right? Like to match or like simplify the coloring style or like that kind of thing, right?
Yep.
So for something like Lizard, then I'm like, okay, I want this kind of thing. I want what is the idea behind it, even though it's like a half body kind of shot. But I'm like, I really like drawing pretty flowing hair and like pretty details and other stuff like that, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna work with Griffith's flowing hair, right? And then I want a bit more of a weird contrast with like a black and white lighting, like a huge part of like black or something like that, just to give it that contrast of his character's nature, like angelic and very beautiful looking, but also there's something off in a way, right?
Yes.
So that was the kind of vibe. No, so it was the kind of idea. So it's better for me to have an idea so I can think about like, oh, I want to do this kind of lighting, or maybe I could use these kind of colors. So yeah, I tend to like to work with an idea. So that's why commissions for me, I kind of break away from like this standard a little bit more as well, because it's kind of like you get told what to do, right? And then you kind of piece those the composition in your head. Sometimes when you draw yourself, you're like, what do I draw today? Like, it kind of gets like that. Whereas sometimes when I get throwing something at work, I'm like, yep, I can do it immediately because I put those pieces of information together to create a composition. Whereas if it's for myself, then I think like, oh, I want to draw something different from before. I want to do something like this, maybe, or like this. I'm not sure. And, you know, if it's your own work, it's a little bit more personal. So there's a little bit more like, I'm not sure, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Freedom of choice, I suppose, in comparison to when you need to go about more professional work, I guess.
It does, it does. Yeah.
So do you take a different approach for professional work in that regard? Do you just go straight into it and work quickly, or do you take your time as well?
It kind of depends. I'm usually a pretty quick worker anyway, as most of the people that follow my work would know that like I juggle so many things and juggle so many illustrations at once. I am usually pretty quick, but ideally I like to spend my time a little bit more on it. So which is why this past half a year I've kind of like made more of a standard like kind of pricing and everything, because I realized that from last year, from juggling so many commissions, that I'm like, oof, I think I don't really enjoy doing these like small commissions. So I'm just going to do more expensive but better artwork commissions, and that's kind of like my kind of thing. So that's the approach I'm going for like now, and I enjoy. I can be more proud of the works that I do that way. Yeah,
good mentality to have, I will say. Just choosing to do higher quality work. Anyhow, in that regard, let's move on to creative industry and professionals then. In which case, so
awesome.
This country, not the greatest for creative industries or professionals in that regard, unless you live in a certain other city, but
Really not.
that's an unfortunate city that's down in the other direction from us anyhow. But yeah, regarding creative industries and pros, how hard is it to break into, or what exactly got you started as a professional?
So I guess it encompasses both within, say, like Sydney, Australia, and also online as well. And let's just say the past 10-ish years, it has changed a lot in a lot of different ways. So that's why when I started out, there really wasn't that much choice for me, honestly. So that's why my art style back then, it switched between either very anime or hyper realistic or like game art. Like it was very different. And I didn't post most of those kind of things because they were more, I treated them more as work, like portfolio illustrations for getting a job at studios or like getting a job at companies or like that kind of thing. But I usually don't post it up because it's too different. When people see art styles are too different, they kind of like it's kind of like people, there's a disconnect of those kind of art styles. So I didn't really post those much up. So that's why when now people see like, oh, I can draw realistic and I can draw hyper realistic watercolor and stuff, I'm like, yeah, because I've been trained, like I've learned that. But yeah, like it's just different from what I usually do. And yeah, so back then, say those long time ago, there wasn't that many choice in online or locally, so my fear was never finding a job, especially for drawing anime manga, right? Especially that wasn't a thing back then. And so yeah, I trained myself to draw more realistic stuff, more semi-realistic like game kind of art, like concept art and that kind of thing, and just really went around trying to get any art related job I can.
All right.
And which was like storyboarding and other stuff like that, which was a bit of a, as a undergraduate, it's a bit of a slave work, but you know, you get, as an undergraduate, you just have to live do, right?
Yeah, you
and
don't get to pick really. You just gotta grab anything.
Yeah, so pretty much I just grabbed any opportunity I had, whether it was like storyboarding, whether it was working like just anything, right? And back then in this game wasn't as developed and not as good as it is today either. It was more of yeah, let's work on this, and one day if the game comes out and it's successful, then we'll pay you. Like it was those kind of things, right? More back then that was a huge thing.
Oh, I felt that a bit too much. Oh man.
Yeah, that was like a flashback to like 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I back then I like kind of like in my mind I kind of blacklisted indie games for a very long time. And it's kind of funny now because I'm working for free in these games, right, currently, and I'm just like thinking, hang on a sec, when did that change? Like, the landscape has changed a lot
Yeah, it
nowadays as
really
well.
has. Yeah.
Yeah, because one, there's a lot more easy to get more different talents and more work. There's a lot more appreciation for creative work and game dev, and a lot more different ways it can branch out, and just more possibilities with less expensive, right? And also, there's a lot more like crowdfunding and sponsors and people who are willing to kind of make these things come true. So yeah, it's really fascinating how now it's like all that is kind of all doable as well. But yeah, so that's kind of well, even though this is a little bit of that kind of like game dev and in this kind of thing, but that's just in general that kind of area. But not to say, yeah, that just area, but say Australia, Sydney still doesn't have a lot of art related kind of jobs. So that's why I think I've always juggled with a lot of jobs. Before I did freelancing and teaching and all that, I did do a gaming job. The only stable gaming related job in Australia is slot machines, gambling games, honestly.
Oh, yeah. I was gonna bring that up actually.
Yep. So that was I worked for that for a few years. Actually learned a lot from it, so it's really, really great. For those who just want, stable, well-paying job, that's great. It's absolutely great. I had a bit of for me, it was always temporary because I know that wasn't the place I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And some people, if they just want that to a stable income, that's perfectly fine. But for me, I like working. I can't sit still. Let's just say I can't sit still. I get too excited about new things. So it was really bizarre because I was just like, I have a good stable job. My coworkers are great, and I draw, do stuff. I'm like, but why aren't I like happy in this after 2 years? Because after like 2 or 3 years, it becomes mundane, right? You don't learn as much. There's not exciting new things, or like there's a slowdown, or game projects get cut because it's like, they don't do as much, and it's just repackaging old stuff, right? And you're just being a file manager at that point. And I'm like, I'm not doing the drawings as much, and I just want to work on more stuff, and I felt like that wasn't the place I wanted to be in. So that's why what you want to do is very important for different people as well, because a lot of people don't really realize that until when they hit that spot, right? After a few years, they realize do I really want to work in this forever? I mean, it's great, but why aren't I happy? Like, it's so bizarre when it happens, because I'm like, it ticks off everything. Like, if I tell people, they'll be like, why do you want to quit your job, right? And they're like, but that was the thing, right? And I couldn't find any other industry or like any other like job that I really want to jump to, because I do value stability and like, of course, who doesn't want constant like stability with money on and everything, right? Especially being an artist. So it's like, what are some? I always looked for options, but I could never find something that is outside of the gambling games, right? I'm not worried about getting a job in the gambling games, because once you work there, they're all the same.
Oh man.
Yeah.
I swear, if one day I go into a casino and I see some of your work, I'm not sure if I'm going to laugh or cry.
Maybe a bit of both.
Yeah.
So after that, I think I just have a very good luck in general, like timing, luck. Things just work out my way eventually for some bizarre reason. It really is. It's like the whole gaming thing on my stream. It just was a joke, but then the timing was like, hang on a sec, why didn't I think this earlier? Because in my mind, it was impossible back 10 years ago. Like, that was the thing, right? And then I was like, hang on a sec, do it now. Like, it was one of those moments, right? So again, it's the timing of things. And the timing of my job was I couldn't find any new way to like kind of run towards throughout those few years, because I was always constantly keeping an eye out, just in case. And there was nothing else stable enough or good enough, or I could really do it. But then a friend of mine say like, hey, they're looking for like tutors for like you Sydney. You interested in teaching physcom? And I'm like, it's very close because I worked at that time. My company was very close to Ultimo, so I was just like, oh yeah, that's very close. So I'm like, and I'm not exactly very crazy busy at work because it's kind of like if you do your task for like day of the week, they don't care what you do.
Oh,
My job.
okay.
Yeah. So that's why I'm like, oh, if I could find some time, like some hours to just go back and forth and do that job, like wholly possible because a lot of those like lectures are just like 2-3 hours, right? So maybe I could talk to her about it. I thought about it, but for some reason my gut feeling was like, wait a few more days before bringing it up to my supervisor. That same week, my company said we're relocating
Oh.
to a suburb that is very bad for me to go to because traffic wise and time wise and just very not great.
Yeah.
So I took the opportunity to say, well, it's. I didn't want to. I felt that if I were to go with that company, I don't think I'd last very long, because just time wise and what it was, wasn't worth it. And so I took that opportunity to quit the job and go for the lecturer job. But of course, that's just one freelance job, right? So for that, throughout that year, that was like the only thing that kind of like kept me going, right? While I try to find other avenues of work. So then that's when it actually took, as if I feel like people kind of like have this idealized thing of like working freelance. Like,
no.
I'd love to work
freelance.
freelance. I know, like freelance is like you have to work twice as hard.
Freelance is painful, really
It
painful.
is painful. It's painful, but I love it. Like, because I get so excited about new stuff. And not everyone is also made for freelance, but I can say now, after a few years, I really do enjoy it. I think it works for me really well now. But at the start, those 2-3 years were really difficult. I also, if people have like great anxiety or like great like worry about these kind of things, I don't think they should jump this route. But if those feel like they were willing to take the risk, they could like take that kind of gamble. I think that it's really rewarding as well. So it's kind of like outweighing those kind of costs and like just trying at it and seeing what works for you, because the thing is you don't really know what works for each person as well. And when I get say like, this is just for my advice, but everyone's different, like what works for everyone. And yeah, eventually what did I do? I remember like just after the first year or two, I'm like, am I just going to hang on to this like one job for like pretty much a casual job, right, for the rest of my life, right? And of course I was still doing like small jobs, like small commissions and stuff, but at that time it's like not as much as I have now. And so I was just trying to find everything I can. And then it's kind of interesting because then I just gave everything a shot, whether it was like setting up a tutoring service, whether it was applying to like indies game stuff, and then people will sort me out as well, like online for like commissions or jobs as well. So there's a bit of that. And eventually it was kind of strange because of my usage job, one time I was looking for jobs and then I saw the teaching the 2D game like assets, the game design course pop up, and I'm like, perfect, I worked in game and I've taught uni. Awesome, no one can beat me with this. Like, I'm like, this job is mine. Like, it's literally like one of those like, like the mega kind of thing. It's like, yes, like this is mine. I got this. It's a little bit of a brag, but like most of the interviews I've ever done, I've always gotten the job, or at least I've been second. So I know that I'm really good at that kind of thing. So I'm just like, this is mine. This is got it. So yeah, I ended up getting that. So I juggled for 2 unis for a while, but I really enjoyed this particular uni because it's more of the stable one. They kept me around for a lot of things, and it's more classes, more kind of things like that. So yeah, it kind of keeps me there, and yeah, it's just a lot of seeing what works, because again, I do enjoy teaching. It's kind of much more easier for me to do so. Some people may not like it as well, so yeah, there's all those kind of stuff.
I will say, damn, lecturer at UCID, man.
Yeah. It's not as prestigious as it sounds. It's not that great.
I've visited the place on countless occasions just for
Oh
meeting up
yeah?
with friends. Yeah,
Yeah.
because a lot of them were a part of the anime sock over there, and it was more a case of
Ah,
yeah,
right.
I'd swing in, have a chat with those guys, and I joined a
Oh,
band
there's a
over
lot.
there even, and yeah,
Oh wow.
so I'd actually end up at UCID quite often.
Oh, that's funny.
But nah, the actual uni I headed to for my own game dev stuff was up north, and that one was
Oh
interesting,
yeah?
I will say.
Hmm. Yeah, it seems like there's also more of those, say, art related or like game related course these days as well. I think I'd say these 5 years, there's more like those kind of pop up. Because I
Mhm.
remember when I graduated from like high school and all that kind of thing, it was just it's either Viscom or digital media or nothing.
Oh damn.
It was that kind of era, right? Even after working for a few years, I went back to TAFE to then that's when they started introducing those kind of courses, which I also studied. So it wasn't until a lot later, like these 7, like I'd say 8 years, that
Ah.
they started to introduce, and now there's more and more options for people, which is great.
Hmm.
Mm.
Like myself, I've run into something similar of a problem. Graduate from game dev, look into the jobs. There's QA
Yes,
testing and there's Code Monkey. I can't
yes,
Code Monkey because I wasn't from that branch. I can QA test at most.
right.
So that turned into okay, I'll just take my freelance work of writing and continue with that. In the meantime,
Mm-mm-mm.
I will go back to TAFE.
Ah, yeah, because I went back to TAFE after my slave work at the storyboards, because you kind of realize what you're missing, right?
Yeah,
After
yeah.
after like working in there, you're like, ooh, if I want to get a better job, then I need to up this skill, and you go back. Yeah.
For myself, it was a case of I have one creative field under my belt. It is not likely going to improve my odds if I take a technical field, so I'll go for a second
Mm-mm.
creative field. And in my case, it ended up being in audio engineering instead, pretty
Mm.
much. Which is why
Interesting,
I'm that
interesting.
bothered to fiddle around with different interfaces and soundboards and whatnot. And why I was freaked
Ah.
the hell out when everything was glitching up at the start, because I was like, wait, I prepared this last night and I was making sure this worked in the afternoon as well. What the hell went wrong?
Technical difficulties, no matter what, it's gonna happen one way or the other.
But yeah, for myself, I've ended up as game dev at the same time
Mm-mm-mm.
as doing writing on the side, at the same time as doing talent production on the side.
Oh wow,
Yeah, the
what a mixture.
talent production part is VTubing actually. That one is a case of helping a guy start up a VTubing agency down here in Sydney actually.
Interesting. Wow. Wow, interesting. It's so bizarre when I hear stuff like happen in Sydney or in Australia, because I know that there's a lot of stuff around in Australia, but everyone's like doing their own thing. I'm like, where are these people coming from?
Yeah,
Like,
it's
how did I not
all
know about these people before?
yeah. My logic when it comes to Aussies is a case of when you find one, you find the lot somehow.
How,
But
right? Like,
but before
sometimes you
then
just
they're
hear,
all yeah.
yeah. That just hearsay about. I'm like, yeah, like I heard there's this there's like a few these novel teams in Australia. I'm like, I only know one. Where's the other ones? Like, like you hear these kind of like hearsays from people, and like, and I know this person who worked in this, and you're like, what? Where? Like, yeah.
Because off the top of my head, I can list off two visual novels that were done in Australia, and that was the aforementioned Otomege, and then another one that was down in Melbourne called Necro Barista. And that was
Ah,
something I was actually streaming last night while having a bit too much to drink.
because I work with 2.5 studios.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, yeah. Looking forward to that one. Mm.
yeah. Alright then, speaking on the
Mm.
subject of indie game dev, you did mention that you wanted a game of your own at some points. Do go
I
into detail.
do. I do. It's still so vague, but it's a dream, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I guess it started again off with as a joke, because I didn't. It's kind of like you're so used to it, you don't really give it a second thought, right? It's kind of like, yeah, one day, like
Yeah, one
kind of
day,
thing.
one
As
day.
a kid, you're like, oh, one day I would love to do like work on games and visual novels and like that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And then now that I've built up so many connections, I mean, it's kind of like subconscious, right? Because you're like, oh, I should know these kind of people. because you never know, right? And I feel like I've always been interested in knowing working with different people, not because or like in the future, like whatever, but it's nice to know different industries because it keeps you more aware or like knowing more about it and working with the people as well. Because yeah, I just really like to hear different words and things that I don't really know much about. And yeah, like over time, maybe because of my time in during conventions and online everything, eventually, yeah, now that I realize I know a lot of people in different fields relating to anime manga, and especially in the con scene, a lot of the cosplayers that I used to know in my generation, a lot of them are working in some form of industry, whether it be game or anime or like movie production, right? Generally, those people kind of gravitate towards those kind of industries, right?
Yep.
So it's really fascinating to see like how that they also become a connection point. Like it feels so casual when I go to like, oh, I got these movie vouchers because I know Man people. Like, you know, it's like it's kind of like, hang on, normal people don't. Like it's one of those kind of things, right? Or like or like, hang on, you know, like so and so is a guest and I just give like a signature to them because I can, right? Because I know people who worked in the convention. I'm like, hang on, normal people can't do this, right? And, you know, it's just like those kind of things, like you unexpectedly, those kind of connections and those kind of things grow, or like they know of someone. And again, a lot of the creative industry people, it's more based on connections more than anything.
Yeah, it's scary how far connections get you at times. Like
it really does, because finding people like doing like a calling post is really the last resort, right? And yeah, so definitely now that I've built up those kind of connections and I realize like, and after working for a few indies games and other stuff like that, I realize, oh, usually a lot of the cost is like art, right? And I'm like, I know my speed and my art style. I'm like, I can do this, you know? Because yeah. And I'm like, oh yeah, I can. And then I'm like, hang on, I know these people, I know these people. If I don't know about like say sound designers and composers, I've worked in indies games that I could hit them up, or like yeah, like I could, it's like people just ask, right? Because if they're already working in these games already, chances are they want to work on more, right? So it's kind of like, and then I'm like, yeah, and people just keen on it. And yeah, and the nature of things, how nowadays there's a lot more like crowdfunding opportunities and things to build up upon that. And plus now that I'm doing a lot more convention stuff, I'm thinking like, oh, it's a great to kind of showcase my work in a different way, because I'm getting like bored of the usual selling fan arts convention thing, because I've been doing it for like too many years. You get bored, right? Like you kind of like get over it because you've been doing it for so long, right? And I don't really exactly need to kind of hustle that money for it. For me, it's more like, how can I showcase my work to the better kind of level is my next kind of step, not so much the money part. So yeah, now it's kind of like, what are my next steps to kind of elevate that kind of my own kind of branding, or like starting up a certain kind of thing through that. And luckily I have really amazing people who are willing to help me out, or yeah, just like volunteer themselves, and I'm just like, but why? Like but I'm really grateful for that. So that's something I'm really excited to plan about, because it's kind of like a kiddie dream that that I can finally kind of bring to life, which is wholly possible nowadays.
And yeah, in your case, it's more or less a case of you're a proven hard worker at this point with some crazy speed, as you put it. So nonetheless, when it comes to a project like this, you need that kind of passion and some kind of drive, and if you can bring that, then you're already more than halfway, is what I'm going to say.
True, that's true.
Because yeah, for a lot of people, it comes down to the motivation. Like, trying to write, say, a novel or something feels very different compared to just trying to write a couple of articles or short stories, and it's the reason why a lot of people don't become authors in the end, even if they're an amazing writer for a short story or whatnot. So say they write the most amazing 2,000 words of their life for whatever the heck it may have been. The moment you're shoved to the fact that, yeah, you're maybe about 5% of the way, good luck, then they freak out, and it's like, oh, this is suddenly impossible.
Yeah, I feel you. In a different different area, like more so like webtoons and comics and stuff. But it's a similar vibe, right? Like you kind of like, yeah, I'm really interested in drawing idea, and you're like, now to have to draw that every single week with no reward. And you're like, or like you don't know when, if it's wholly possible, right? And you're like, am I willing to kind of sacrifice 2 years of my life for this? Maybe. And yeah, it's a hard thing. So definitely I can understand how hard it is for writers as well. And I feel like especially I hear it a lot, so I'm not sure. Like this is just from what I've heard, right?
Yeah.
So feel free to correct me. But
Sure.
I do feel that a lot of writers say that they feel very underappreciated because they don't get a lot of comments, a lot of readers, or like things in general.
Yeah, it is very hard to get any kind of publicity with writing. Because
Because it's hard to showcase, right?
it is very, very difficult to showcase. Like,
Yes.
I do a couple of writing streams every now and then. Those
Yeah.
are probably the only way I can see of properly showcasing a work in
Yeah.
its original spirit, essentially. Because
right.
after you write something and throw it out to the wild, people can interpret your writing or scuff your writing however they please, essentially. Like, sure, death of the author and all that business, whatnot. People are free to interpret. I don't particularly mind. But if it is on the spot where I can give something a particular intonation or reading or purpose, essentially, then I will throw as much of that into it as I can just to showcase the benefits
Right.
of a writing style or a particular kind of characterization.
Yeah, you see, like I've always, because I don't have much talent in writing, which is why I draw, right? But so I've noticed this because as a kid, you try all sorts of different hobbies, right? Like as like a teenager, you're like, okay, I want to try writing, I want to try doing this kind of thing, I want to try graphics, I want to try web design. You get excited about, well,
Yeah.
for me, I get excited about trying different things. Yeah, I've actually written a few fanfics before, as you do
boy.
as a kid.
Yeah, as you do.
But I've noticed that for me, it was a huge struggle because I know what I like, and my writing style is not that. So let's just say, so I can tell I'm like, this isn't quite right. This isn't what the level of the things I like. Like, it doesn't match up right. And I'm sure, like, if with a lot of time, it would get, like, with anything, it would get better. But I know that it's a bit of a struggle for me because I feel like my writing style suits seem to. It sounds like more like a script rather than an actual nicely written thing.
I will say,
yeah.
in the medium of visual novels, scripts are perfectly fine, is the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. And but one thing that I found, so that's why I stopped doing fanfiction writing and used it in art on like doujins and other stuff instead. And one commonality I found in my writing style, even though I didn't know I had a writing style, but you can see that you have a sense of yourself in your like works, right? No matter what. I realized that I really valued of making it very in character or very well rounded. Like from start to end, I have to have the story come full circle, or like there's a plot, there's like a moral, there's a something like it comes full circle that way. So, or like some edgy line, or like it's like like the last line of the text is like this edgy line, like that kind of like that was my kind of writing style, right? So yeah, I found that like I do have a kind of way, like a certain method of coming up with like not so like writing, but like my method of storytelling in a way. So I always find that quite interesting. How even though my medium has changed, but then there are certain things that kind of retain through that way. So that's why I really appreciate like really good writers, because I have a very specific writing style that I like, but it's very rare for me to kind of come up. Not really rare, but like I'm very picky, I'd say. Yeah. So yeah, that's why I appreciate it when people can write kind of like that as well, because I'm like, I know I can't. It'll be scripts.
Because yeah, personally, I write in 3 different styles according to whatever the person needs. Like, for games, it is the jankest one possible, because my boss was pretty much a case of, okay, you write way too detailed, you need to streamline your writing a lot. I mean, okay, how streamlined are we talking? I write about 300 characters for a text box, and he's like, no, that's too many. He was like, okay, cut it down to the length of a tweet. And
Ah,
I'm just
right.
like, holy hell, how am I gonna pack this much information into a tweet? Okay.
You see, that's like me writing about my comic. It's just like lines without context. Like
But yeah,
my script is literally like lines and then sound effects here and then bracket of the inner thought and that's it.
it became a case of adapting my own personal style down to that level of just condense it, be extremely concise, and it became a case of, okay, now I know how to write in extremely prosy style, a moderate style, and a very, very, very streamlined style. To the point of
Right.
it's just like, okay, in and out, done. Player gets
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
player
yeah.
gets the information they need. Player doesn't have to, beat around the bush too
Yeah.
much, and they're straight through. Because the
Yeah.
nature of that writing was very much just random events which popped up, and in and out.
Ah, yes. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Rather
Eh, sounds
than,
about right.
rather than, yes, you are embarking on an entire saga.
Fantasy novel.
You're embarking on an entire saga, all because you picked up an apple. No, 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 no. You need to be done with that apple in about less than a minute. Have fun.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that would be fun. That would be hella funny to parody though.
Yeah, just some of the first few scripts I wrote for those were, man, I want to go back and edit those really badly, but they already got implemented, and I'd feel really bad going back now. But yeah,
Right, right. It's always a learning experience that way. Even for like some of the games and some of the stuff I worked on, I'm like, oof. I'm like, now that I'm like, could be better. Then, yeah,
but yeah,
it gets like that.
in terms of writing styles, I will definitely say there are ways of rounding out one's writing style and getting to a more kind of appealing, mass appeal kind of affair, I suppose. In kind of the same way of art, in following trends and whatnot. In the case of the current scene, there are two schools of thought, pretty much. There is the Brandon Sanderson approach and the Patrick Rufus approach. Brandon Sanderson is that full-on beige prose where it is just really fast, straight to the point, and massive focus on characterization instead. So the characters tell the story.
Right.
It is not the environment or how blue the curtains are or whatever. It is the characters' thoughts and their actions, and it is condensed really hard into that instead.
I see.
The Patrick Rufus approach takes the complete opposite. It is a case of it is so ridiculously flowery that you will probably have every single sensation appealed to, even when you didn't ask for it.
That's a bit too much. You see, as a kid, I really liked fantasy games, so I thought I liked fantasy novels. But when I read fantasy novels, I couldn't picture it in my head because there's too much.
Yeah, fantasy novels tend to be very overloaded.
It was I couldn't read. I couldn't finish most of them because it was just too much for me. So I ended up liking non-fiction stuff instead.
In the case of that, then I would recommend giving Sanderson a read at some point just to get a grasp of that style of just straight and to the point.
Yeah, I think that would probably work better with me.
Because yeah, Patrick Rufus's style it's also fantasy, but it is so hardcore into it. But the one thing I do like about that particular way that Madman writes is the fact that he writes it in such a smooth fashion that if you read it out loud, it reads very naturally. And just it's just very easy to read, because I spent an afternoon just lying in bed with my best friend and just reading along the book, and it was just like, man, we went past 50 pages and we didn't even realize.
Oh my goodness.
What the heck is going on? And it's like, man, that was way too smooth. We should close that here and maybe continue that another time.
That's a good writing then.
I will say though, for visual novels, depending on how you structure it, you have to take in a massive amount of considerations.
Yeah, so that's the thing I'm not really sure about the approach as well, because I've never really worked on that side of the things, right? I just get like told like, okay, I just draw this scene or like draw this character, right? So now that I have to be like, if I'm the overseer, I at least have to know how that's kind of structured. But yeah, and for me, because writing is not my strong suit. So I'm just like, how do I go about it? Do I dot point it and tell them to like? How does that usually work?
Hmm. Okay, when it comes to that, there's usually one head writer, which will outline a majority
Yeah.
of the plot elements, character interactions, and whatnot, and what
Mm.
needs to be done within the story.
Yeah.
So, what needs to happen? So, from there,
Mm.
you have the rest of the writing team, which needs to flesh out the how it happens.
Right. Okay.
And depending on that initial plot outline, will more or less dictate how strong the story is when put all together. Because that
I
way,
see.
the main plot line needs to revolve around evidence and proof, essentially.
Yeah.
So
I see.
you need to hint at something before you can reveal something. You cannot just have a random writer drop
Random
something
thing.
out of
Yeah.
nowhere and then it never happen again. You need to kind of
Yeah.
take that quality control and be like, okay, that guy doesn't have a gun all of a sudden, okay? That guy,
Oh yeah.
all he's got is a saber on him. Therefore, he is probably screwed when he runs into the guard.
Right.
Those kinds of
Yeah.
details.
I see.
A lot of writing is asking the why and how things come about. For instance, one of the biggest things to worry about for a lot of fantasy writers is simply world building, because
Yeah.
building an entirely new world is so bloody complex that
It
most people
is.
fail at it spectacularly.
Not just like people, but like anime in general. Like it just doesn't. It just feels like a online game rather than actually like a fantasy
Yeah.
like thing, right?
If I could get my hands on most of the isekai writers out there, I would probably strangle them. But nonetheless,
Yeah. The only really well like so-called like more so recent-ish like really good fantasy is like I'm really huge on Rage of Bahamut, like Shingeki no Bahamut. That was a very good fantasy, well developed fantasy world that I really liked.
fair enough. I
Yeah.
think in terms of isekai kind of plot lines and whatnot, I think the most developed one that I read, at least in terms of how well they did the world building, was probably Grimgar, actually. That series, because within the anime it's a bit kind of generic and whatnot. There's a sense of drama in that everything feels very heavy and very brutal, essentially. Within the novels, within the novels, things are a lot more colorful, but it's a lot more focused in on how the world actually works and
Yeah,
how
I
they
see, I see.
properly integrate someone, or how they properly integrate a group of people that are constantly isekai'd over to the point where the world is actually used to having these people come in and come out. In a case of, oh, you guys have no knowledge of the world? Oh, yeah, nah, we get people like you every month. Yeah, you guys, you're basically volunteer soldiers, so sign up with the guild, go here, go there, yep, you'll be right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they integrated it quite well in that regard, and it was a case of, okay, this is a breath of fresh air rather than the protagonist that comes in, aha, all my gaming knowledge is gonna work.
Yes.
Yeah.
My gaming.
That part really kills me sometimes. Just
There's just
yeah.
something about that kind of isekai, like comparing to the old isekai of like the 90s and everything. It's like a very different approach. Back then, it was more like I find that the stories were so different, like the conclusions and everything. Back then, it's kind of like everyone had the adventure. They go back to their own thing, they own world, but have to part with their love interest as well. And then it's kind of like, then what next? Like, is that it or is that all? But now it's like, all right, we fall into the isekai. This world is much better. Like, it's like, all right.
Yeah, I will say one thing that works in Grimgar's favor specifically is they wipe the memory of all of the isekai characters.
Ah, interesting.
Like right as they come in, the first few lines of the book are pretty much a case of awaken, blah blah blah. They come out, then they think they remember a couple of words, then they completely forget about anything from the modern world, essentially.
Ah, I see.
And that gives the author plenty of freedom to teach new things and showcase aspects of the world.
I see.
You know,
interesting.
let's try a little experiment actually when it comes to world building. So think of that otomage you may want to write at some
Yeah.
point. The first question I will ask you And this one may sound
Sweats.
completely out of place, actually.
Alright.
What do they eat?
That is. I'm just like, mine goes blank.
Because that is an extremely important and foundational question, essentially.
Really? Well, I'm setting it more in a modern kind of like era. So. Sweats. At least I know, well, modern era, but also, yeah, that is a good question.
Modern era. So wake up, 7 a.m., 9 to 6, 9 to 5 job, needs breakfast. What's on the table?
Oh. Sweats. Did not think this through, huh? Actually, haven't been thinking about it much recently, but yeah, I haven't actually really decided what kind of cultural setting as well.
Fair
exactly.
enough,
So that's another thing that I'm like, if it depends on the culture, or like it's a blend of cultures as well. Because you know how some worlds are like just
some places
frozen
are
or whatever.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
a melting pot of cultures.
Yeah, I feel like a melting pot of culture would be a little bit more interesting that way because it is like a more like a made up kind of setting, rather than just like a this is like a Japan based kind of thing. Because I feel like I mean we've already have enough stories regarding those ones, as well. So yeah, kind of want to step away from just the old OG Japan setup. Yeah, but probably a bit of a
If you're going melting pot, then you don't need to look much further than Sydney itself, really.
That's true. That's true. Could be anything really. All right, Migoreng it is.
Migoreng? Okay. If we're going for Migoreng, that implies the existence of, yes, modern machinery, manufacture and whatnot, farms, mills, all that jazz.
Interesting.
Typical kind of modern setting as a whole. Which would pretty much mean, yes, you can hand wave a lot of elements just in the fact that most people would be familiar with what's already in the setting, because that's what we live in.
Yeah.
It's a case of, oh, he's making instant noodles. Oh, I do that in the morning. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, this is perfectly fine, yeah. But it's when you start bringing out the more fantastical elements and whatnot, if you have any planned, that would be when things go out the window and you suddenly have to think, okay, why doesn't this disrupt the natural world order?
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that I haven't really balanced yet. Like, how much do I want of that, like, kind of like digital world, or like, or like how much of I want it to be like the real world setting, or how much I want like digital setting, because that really kind of changes up the whole thing. Yeah. So that's another thing that I'm trying to. Well, I haven't had the time recently, but just cleaning up things. But that's a main thing that I really want to get sorted out first.
Because the main idea is you add a point that you want to reach, then you have to think of the implications and how you arrived at that point.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of thinking backwards, thinking forwards, and then you take that step multiple times for different aspects of your setting, and eventually you create a concrete image. Kind of like sketching till you eventually hit something that you like.
Right. I see.
And that's how you eventually build the world and the characters. And then when you get to the characters, you have to think, okay, how much of the world are these characters actually going to touch, and how much of this is useless?
Right.
That is one thing certain light novels are actually very terrible at.
Really?
Yeah.
Like in what kind of way?
Let's see. So one particular light novel which I will rag on a lot when it comes to it is Mahoka Koko no Rettose. So the irregular the irregular at magic school, whatever the heck that translates to. Anyhow. The main issue with that one is a case of they go very heavy on the world building, to the point where certain aspects that you probably never needed to know, were never going to be plot relevant, are included in the writing as well. It is to the point where you will enter a cafeteria and get a 2-page long exposition dump of how they get their food.
I see.
In the case of, yes, this this takes water and breaks it down to the molecular level to form whatever dish you want ordered at your fingertips, blah blah blah. I'm like,
doesn't it like providing too much information, doesn't
Yeah.
it like reduce the amount of like imagination, or like that we might reduce that kind of like filling in the gaps? Because up to interpretation.
you're aiming to
'cause that's
hit
not-
that sweet
yeah.
spot.
Yeah.
Because when you go beyond that sweet spot, is a case of either you're trying to provide a crazy audio-visual kind of experience, or you've just gone way too far, essentially.
Yeah. I can see how that could happen.
So
another-
let's take
let's
another
see.
logical extreme. It's a case
Oh.
of
Tara said that
Ah,
another
yeah.
one. So I'm a spider. So what were there's 3 pages of scan data, so they would comment. That's a bit too much.
When you go into the multiple pages for exposition is when things get troublesome. Because then you
Aha.
realize you're sending someone a technical readout instead of just like what they needed to know that this is cool.
Ah,
So,
right. I think I'm the opposite, because I think like I'm so basic, right? So I kind of like cram like 2 things in, like 2 or 3 meanings in like one scene that people are gonna miss anyway. I'm the opposite.
Oh my. But yeah, it's really a case of you just need to know how much you need.
Yeah.
And you aim for that, try not to go over that, and then you should be set. If you go too far beyond that, it then becomes the point of, oh shit, maybe I've just bored the hell out of the reader, or maybe this would have been better in the appendix out the back of the book instead.
Yeah. Interesting though. Guess it really depends on like the medium too, right? For example, even in like say video games, right? Like say Final Fantasy 13 and 15. For an example here, they have such good world, but like they just throw like walls of text at you.
Oh yeah, the
Like,
delivery
in the
in
loading
13
screens.
was
Yeah.
nasty, is what I will say.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, you see cool flashing lights and everything. Yes, amazing action, brilliant animation, whatever. And then loading screen. Oh god.
The
What-
wall of
what is
text.
all this?
Yeah, like I feel like they didn't integrate those kind of parts well, because I know that I really love the world setting, the history and the lore and how they integrate behind it, but the way they put it present is just kind of like, yeah, if you're interested, here's this text, and you're like, but what? Like, gosh, you just expect us to read all that and appreciate that? Like, yeah.
Because one other interesting method I will just bring up now is what's called in media res. This is a case of where you're dropped straight into the action and told practically nothing. That is the start of Final Fantasy 13 in a nutshell. You have
Yeah.
you have no idea what the bloody hell is happening, then suddenly lightning just breaks out.
Yeah.
And all,
But isn't a lot of
yeah.
games and stuff like that though?
Yeah, a lot of games like throwing you right into the action first before
Yeah.
stripping away your abilities and then having you earn them back one by one, usually.
Yes.
This was very popular around the time of, say, Metroid, essentially.
Ah,
So when
I can see that.
Yeah, when Metroid, Super Metroid came out, SNES era, that kind of
Oh,
thing.
I love Super Metroid.
Yeah. Upon those where, Space Pirate ship crashes, blah blah, your powers are stripped and you gotta go back out there and find them and then learn the story that way. Yeah, it's the case of, we'll give you a taste of the power and the eventual gameplay that you're going to have, but you're going to have to earn it.
Right. I see.
So,
Interesting to see how that influence came through.
So yeah, it's a case of, for a lot of games, you're initially wanting to sell the fantasy of things. So
Yeah.
you want to sell what's great about this game, or the ideal image. So say we go into a shooting game.
Yeah.
Say Apex, they really want to sell the idea of, not necessarily a brutal blood sport or anything like anything like scary or horror-like, as with some of the more original classic battle royales, where
Oh yeah, it's pretty chill. Apex is.
Apex takes the opposite route, where it's more
Yeah.
of a thriller rather than a horror game. So Apex, you're actually heavily encouraged to go out and take fights rather than turtle up and hide somewhere.
Ah, right.
And they sell this a lot by having the initial jump as something like, rather than trying to sneak away and parachute down, you are instead jetting forwards with everyone else and then landing gung ho and then going
I
straight into the
yeah
action.
yeah
Yeah.
yeah because out of all the first person, I mean, I've only been playing like Apex. I haven't really played much first person shooters before that, but yeah, I've been really enjoying it too in a multiple kind of way, especially because it's like very fresh to me as well, right?
Yeah.
So new and exciting. So it's really and I heard a lot of people really enjoy it, like because it's just so fun, like overall for them.
They push that image of just, this is a thriller, go out there, knock some people down, go ham, essentially. Rather than back for, say, PUBG,
Yeah.
that game was more or less a case of run and hide. You want to be the last out of 100 people alive, you are going to need to be cunning as hell.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I bet a little bit about, but it doesn't feel satisfying when you win because like you've just been hiding out most of the time, right? You're like, for when it comes to happen, like that doesn't feel like an earned win. I really want to get out at least get more kills. I don't have to win, but I just want to, I just want to get out there and get kills.
Yeah.
Yes. So I definitely feel that.
Because yeah, that is very close to developers' intention, more or less. They want you out there. They want you out there shooting. They don't want you just hiding, because they build so many tools for you to find other players that, yeah.
You can't keep
You can't just hide.
That's true.
And the whole gameplay is centered around just fight after fight.
Yes.
So, like a good thriller film, it's the case of escalation. A thriller wants every scare or every encounter to be bigger and better than the last. And that's what Apex tries to achieve in the fact of your gear essentially going up as you take more fights, and the tension rising as you eventually hit that final point.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I can do that. Oh, interesting.
Compared to like PUBG, where you get that shock horror one moment, and then the next you're like, okay, everything's chill again. Then you get that next moment of panic and it spikes up again, then it just chills out. For Apex, it's just one after another, keep pushing, and eventually you get to the end and it's like, man, it's finally over.
Yep. It's always interesting to hear that side as well, because I haven't really played much to kind of like compare.
For myself, as becoming more or less a game dev was a case of I didn't rely much on academia for it, so I did a lot of self-study. And that just resulted more in the case of every single game I play now, I break down to a fault.
That's really understandable, especially with self-study or like with being it part of your like interest in work as well, right? But that's really great too, because I feel like self-studying is always very important no matter what. I guess, well, it's always great to have like, you know, that kind of path of education or something like that. But I feel like a lot of people, especially I see this a lot as a lecturer, people are used to being like spoon-fed. And it's frustrating for me as well, because they ask for like, you know, every little thing, and it's kind of like, go figure it out yourself. Like, you know, in my heart, I want to say that, right? Because I had to figure out 90% of the things myself, and 90% of the things I did were trial and error. Like, no one were examples before me. I was the example. So it's like when people just come to me like, hey, like, do you have any examples of this or examples of that? I'm like, you know, just go for it. Like, just honestly, like, what are you guys so afraid of? Like, it's. But having said that, I consider myself a very fearless person to begin with. So I shouldn't expect everyone to lead that same mentality.
And to be fair, that's the part I really like about TAFE education, because they throw you right into the thick of it and say, yeah, just go fiddle with the thing, go. Rather than,
Uni is more like a bit of more of a spoon-fed kind of thing. I do find. Yeah.
I will say uni, when it came to game dev, was a case of if you just went through their program as it was, you came out as someone who was practically useless, was what I found it as.
Yep.
So you really needed to put your back into it and figure out more abstract concepts on your own and what actually worked, what didn't.
It really is like that. A lot of people like don't really go above that kind of like basic level. And I feel like it's a shame because, understandably, I was like it's kind of like you don't really realize the importance of how those kind of things can help you until after you've worked in those kind of areas, which I find I also understand because I also went back to TAFE, right?
Yep.
So I get it. Like, so that's why I can't really like say like, oh, those students like they could have gained so much more, but it's kind of like they're not in the right mindset for it yet because they don't really know what they lack or like they need for it. Yeah.
Like when you're an undergraduate as well, it's a case of this is your first degree or this is maybe your first pick and you have no idea if you actually liked it or not.
It's so funny though as well because thinking about that, my last trimester of students, I can tell which ones are the ones straight out of high school because they're so talkative and noisy, like disruptive. And I'm just like, and then when I mention, like when I overhear their conversations, I'm like, they just graduated from high school. It's pretty funny.
For me, the funnier case when it comes to lecturers is the case of, they're a first year if they've turned up to the lecture. They're a second year and beyond if you've never seen them before.
Yeah. Yeah, some of the really good ones, they just show up for a few lessons, miss a few, and then suddenly show up again, and you're like, all right.
I was unfortunately that kind of bastard of a student, especially in certain classes. But any classes I turned up to, I made sure I made the biggest impression possible so that when it came to the end of term and they were just like, oh yeah, did this guy participate in class? Oh yeah, he did that one time. Yeah.
That one time.
We'll give him a good mark.
That's funny.
Because that was the case for like one of the writing classes I did actually. It was a case of I turned up to maybe 5 of them throughout the semester, but I got given full marks for it. I was like, did I make that big an impression? Huh? I was kind of surprised at it myself, honestly, but as it happens, anyhow.
Yeah, that's the experience of a student.
But yeah, eventually though, you figure out that there's a lot of stuff that you really need to just go out there, learn it yourself, or go out there, give it a shot. Because same if you're in the programming field even.
Yeah, I agree. Even for me, like being a digital media and like digital media viscom, that kind of learning those kind of things, of course that helped me greatly as I am now. But back then it's kind of like, oh, I don't want to learn about typography and graphic design and like animation and video editing. I don't want to learn about that. I just want to draw for work. Little did I know those are the skills that brought me to elevate all my work today. Like if it wasn't because of my animation and like working in the gambling games and those kind of animation skills, my live 2D and models wouldn't be as good as it is so quickly. Because I understand animation.
Let's see, the one fella I know which does do very nice rigging and whatnot when it comes to that kind of affair. Artist as well. Fella that's working on my lot anyhow. Yeah. That guy, so Kaiman Paul, if you've ever seen him around at Smash or whatnot. Anyhow, that guy was more or less a case of being an engineer, or mechatronics engineer specifically. So when it came to rigging live 2D models and whatnot, he found it very natural, almost a case of, this is like programming a robot, or getting a robot to work.
You see, it's interesting,
Only he could do it with his own art, and that's what really got him into it.
So it was a like similar thing, but with art, right? Because I worked with like video editing and animation through After Effects, so it was more like a specialized version. Like, so I was just like, oh yeah, it's like the puppet tool, like and there's keyframes and everything, right? Only with like a little bit more of a 3D mesh aspect, and I'm like, cool. So it only took me, I didn't really pursue it that much. I was only like testing it out, but the basic kind of things to get used to it only took me a day or two. Yeah.
Oh, so you do both your art and rigging then?
Oh no, I don't really do rigging. But I've tested out the program.
Okay.
So I haven't really got anything. I would like to jump into it again, but I don't want to be someone who's like just half good at everything. I just want to understand and try little things in my own time. But if there's someone better than me to do it, I'd rather pay them for it.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Because I learn more looking at the works of others and see how great that can be as well. So by having that, it's kind of like I benefit a lot of it as well.
Because yeah, it then becomes the case of, yeah, then you'd learn how to split all your layers according to what they'd need, etc.
Mm-mm. And that's why, like, even interestingly as well, the other day I got a DM from someone from the Live 2D server, and saying that, like, oh, if they want to partner up with me for live 2D commissions, like doing like a whole package kind of thing. Thought about it for a sec, but then I thought, no, I don't really need it for one, because it's not like it's a huge advantage for me anyway. Another thing is that so far I really enjoy meeting new people. I really like talking and meeting new people, and I've met a lot of riggers and like people through that way because of the riggers of my VTuber children, and yeah, and just like seeing the little differences and stuff, and I can see what works for different riggers, and some have different approaches. Some of them really love doing interesting toggle poses or like animations just for the heck of it, right? They like doing that kind of thing. But some of them are just more like, oh, they want to do like really pretty eye animations and other stuff like that, right? So I can see like, oh, they're little minute different approaches. They're all good, but it's kind of interesting, and I kind of see opens my eye a bit more by seeing the way that different people work. And also, if I just work with mostly one person, then it's just kind of be like, it'll be stunting my, like, I don't want a tunnel vision, and just have it streamlined just for work. And yeah, I feel like it's important to kind of learn from a bit of everyone in general.
Okay, fair enough then. Let's see, I'll move on to one of the seeded questions here. So,
Yeah.
what exactly are your thoughts on the indie VTuber scene, having, well, done a couple of models up and whatnot?
Oh, it's a really interesting industry overall. It's when I feel like it's a really good outlet for people who are really afraid to, one, they don't want to show their like face or like that kind of thing, to keep that anonymity. It's really great, especially for a lot of introverts who kind of like shy to kind of showcase their kind of skills or things like that. They have something to do so, and it's a really great way, like outlet for a lot of different skill sets, right? Whether it be drawing, gaming, singing, like all sorts of things, right? Like it's one good way to kind of showcase kind of things. And I feel like another great thing is that it's kind of brings a lot of different people together, which I really like. And yeah, so far I've been really enjoying just meeting all these new VTubers, people who are interested in these kind of scenes or interested in like just art in general as well, because there's a lot more appreciation of artists in those kind of areas as well. And I've met a lot more through that. And yeah, I feel like don't know how it's going to develop from now on, honestly, because you know, you never know how in 5 year times how that's going to change, right? But for now, I feel like it's still a growing thing and still evolving, and it's kind of nice to see that everyone can be there, like, you know, it's kind of like back then when people have their like forum OCs and other stuff like that, and now they can become the OC, right? Like it's kind of like a next level form of like role play, but except there's more things you can do, right? So it's kind of living that childhood like little kid dream of like, oh, I want to be this character, I want to be this, and you have this setting whole thing going on. So I find that, because I used to be, as a kid, I was into many hobbies, and one of them was like role playing and being like drawing, making characters as well. So I was really into that. Yes. Yeah. So that's why it's kind of bringing that kind of vibe again. And we are all Chunibyo. Our secret is. hey, I always admit I'm a bit of a Chunibyo. And yeah, it's just a really fun medium, and also giving more opportunities to different collaborations besides not just artists, but say like people who are doing like gaming collabs, like cover like for songs, and brings a lot more options out there as well. Yeah, better than just like Twitter saying like, hey, I worked on this with this kind of thing. Like nowadays, like there's like a name and face to, in a way, for everyone.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's a distinct identity, I suppose. I don't know. Like when I initially started out in this kind of circle, I was just like, I'd just come off a radio job essentially, and was just like, all right, I've got nothing to my name. I may as well make something of my name out here somewhere, so let's give it a shot.
It's interesting. For me, it was a mix of reasons. So one is, well, I got into VTubers because of Niji Sanji, and I'm really into Niji Sanji. I like everyone knows that, so I'm just whew. And because I actually knew of Hollow, like as with most people, Hollow's Live and Hollow Stars like was the bigger name like in the English audience, because of that. But yeah, but what really got my attention was Niji Sanji, and the reason why I liked Niji Sanji more in comparison is because Hollow Stars and Hollow Live is a bit more like character, like idol kind of based, right? Whereas Niji Sanji is more like, hey, let's do this, like why not, like kind of thing, right? Like it's a lot more freedom. I feel like they're a bit more themselves in that kind of way, right? And to see how they innovate, say like they do their game tournaments, and all these kind of things and collaborations, and yeah, I found that I learned a lot through it because of like whether it's like the point of marketing as well, right? Because they're like, when I see like Kanai playing his like crane games of trying to get like products of his own or like other Ninja Sanji members, it's like it's cute to watch, but also what great marketing! Like it's things like that, right? Like as someone who's in these kind of fields, you're like, wow, this is genius! Like you can make marketing entertaining, like like. So I find that like I learned a lot from that, and to see how they push these kind of mediums and development is really great. And so that's why when I also, besides me enjoying their content as well, then I'm like, hey, I want to do like VTuber stuff also because I'm like, wow, people pay this much for their work, like what, like kind of thing, like what. But also because of my background in animation, when I actually started looking into it, I'm like, Chotto, this is just a little bit more of a detailed version of what I used to do. Like, dude, I'm missing out. Like, what is this kind of thing, right? And then another reason why I also started like being streaming and well, essentially become a VTuber and artist and streaming as well, is also because I used to stream a long time ago, and but that was before streaming was really like Twitch was a huge thing. And I used to stream on like livestream.com and other stuff like that. And I really enjoyed it.
Okay.
Yeah, so this was a very old platform. When livestream.com started getting like down, every website has a lifespan. Yeah. And when I saw that it's kind of, they don't really update stuff anymore. You know how they kind of start when websites stop kind of like updating or like improving, right? And you kind of feel that. So, and I was just like, oh, I want to find new mediums. I signed up for Twitch very long time ago. I tried streaming twice, but never got like anything compared to my live stream. So I was just like, this sucks. Like, it was more like, this isn't working. I'm not gonna go back to it. I did do a little bit of Facebook streaming, and I enjoyed it for a little bit, but it was hard to kind of like keep consistent or like keep on at it as well. So I guess trying to find the right platform was hard because at that time, then there was a lot of different platforms, right? It's like YouTube, Facebook, like Twitch, and all sorts of things. And then it wasn't until because of like, well, the pandemic and everything, and like more people started streaming, and I understood how it worked a little bit more. And now there's a lot more space for it, and how I understood how it worked a little bit more. And now that it's more developed after some years compared to back then, there was like barely any art like streamers, and so that's why I couldn't really find my footing as well. See, I told you I jump into things way too early. I tell you I jump things in way too early before the timing is right. And yeah, so I finally kind of got back into it, and also by having this kind of avatar like VTubing as well, it's also a walking advertisement for my works, right? So that's another reason. And yeah, there's a lot of multiple reasons, so not just one. It's probably like 5. Yeah. Multi-level marketing indeed.
Yep. Definitely multi-level marketing at that point.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And now that I will have friends who helped me out with like doing like the whole Discord and like all sorts of things, and then I really enjoy it. Like now I can say that like the whole VTuber scene and the whole this kind of scene, streaming VTuber scene, really changed a lot for me this year, I'd say. Yeah.
For myself, my main restriction when it came to streaming was more or less the fact that I am out in the middle of nowhere and my net connection is so garbage that, generally speaking, I would end up disconnecting way too many times to consider it feasible.
Right.
It is actually a miracle that the only technical problems we've had so far have been sound and not network issues.
Goodness.
Yeah. Anyhow, that was the main thing, stopping myself from streaming, and once I got into it, it was a case of, this isn't too bad, I'm doing roughly what I do anyway, so why not? And then when it came to doing interviews, it was a case of, I just came off of radio. Radio was fine, though I don't think I earned any of that viewership myself, that was all on the brand. So let's see if I can't make something of myself from there onwards.
Yeah, it'd be like that sometimes. I understand that happens with art as well, right? Sometimes you just work in a project and you're like, well, I got nothing out of that, but it's all right. You learn, get something out of it, like in one way or the other. Same for webtoons. That's why I tried webtoons twice. I realized I didn't get any new followers or anything despite people reading the comics, because it was those kind of websites. I'm like, nah, this isn't for me. So I just jumped out of that.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
It's part of the case why I don't really publish my writing publicly that often, and mostly keep it to just professional work, where I do keep that portfolio and I'm like, oh yeah, you want to see some of my writing? Here's some samples. If not, then yeah, don't worry about any works that I release publicly, essentially, because most of those are written almost like a madman or like in a fever dream, essentially, and I very rarely release them out unless I was that out of it to the point where I was like, you know what would be a great idea?
Sometimes things like that work out.
Sometimes, like,
yeah.
If you ever scroll through my Twitter profile, you may see one or two random pieces there. And those are written like a madman, because, good lord, nothing comes out of writing for about 2 hours, drinking or sipping at something, and then realizing, yes, man, I could have changed that detail and streamlined the entire story.
Well, it happens.
Yeah, it happens. It's kind of sad in that regard of just like, yes. Look back at your work like the morning after or something. It's like, oh man, I actually did this. Oh man. Do you ever really get that feeling of introspection where you leave a work alone for like a day or a week or so, you come back to it and then suddenly it's very different impression?
A lot of artists have that for maybe not so a week, but like maybe you wake up the next day and look at your drawing that you did the night before and you're like, this is what wasn't as good as I thought, like, or something like that. That happens. I feel like that happens to a lot of artists, especially because we get so into it, but then when we kind of look back at it, and then sometimes we see like we miss out on things maybe because we're tired or like all sorts of things as well. Like it couldn't be the best as it could be, and then you're like, yeah. But it happens. Like you're looking back at your own work and everything.
Fair enough. Anyhow, let's see. I did mention drinks for a moment, and I do have this odd question I normally ask everyone. Recommend a drink, any kind of drink at all.
Recommend a drink. This is gonna be a little bit random, but it just kind of popped into my mind. But I like also like a winter melon tea.
Winter melon tea.
Yeah, winter melon tea. It's sweet, but like it's a sweet. Usually you can even make it at home as well. You can probably get it at like Gongcha or like all those kind of like places as well. It's a sweet tea, but it's actually really healthy. It's like a natural kind of like sweet. So that's why like if you are going for like and it's not too heavy as well, right? Because sometimes like milk tea and everything is too much. And something like that is quite of light without being too strong, and I kind of like that. Although I don't have it as often as I like, because sometimes I get distracted by other stuff. But that's always like a something easier like to drink, no matter what. Yeah.
Easy to drink, eh?
Yeah.
I believe I've had this maybe once or twice before, and that's only because my best friend is a tea connoisseur.
Tea connoisseur.
Actually, rather than tea connoisseur, she's a drinks connoisseur. To the point
Nah, I
of
appreciate that. It's fun.
yeah, to the points of she'll have one shelf, like one large shelf on the side. The top shelf will be mostly teas and whatnot. Second shelf might be like coffee or whatnot, and then the bottom shelf is all the alcohol, all of it.
Ah, yes. Something for every mood.
Pretty much. It's the point of, let's see, so myself, I run with this bar aesthetic, and I have maybe 3 or 4 bottles on me at most. Her on the other hand, she's running around with like the whole bar, pretty much.
Ah, yes.
And just like there's wines tucked away in the back of there. That's whiskey, that's cognac. Oh, that's gin as well. Oh god, you've got everything you wanted to mix any cocktail in the bloody universe, essentially.
Can have anything for any meal.
And then I look at the top shelf, and it's every tea you could feasibly think of as well.
Like tea is always, at least it's easy. Well, you can store it for very long as well, so it's just kind of collection just grows.
That collection, I've added to it before myself as
Oh
well.
my goodness.
But yeah, there's all kinds of preserved stuff up there. I'm just like, man.
Yeah.
Man, like, I swear she just picks something different every time I come over. She's just like, oh yeah. It's like
Take a roulette, like
Yeah.
just take a random pick.
it's very much like, hey, try this out. Oh, hey, I figured a really nice drink the other day. Hey, try this one out. Then there's the times where it's like just afternoon or so, and it's like, yes, would you like to try out this alcohol? I'm just like, we're day drinking again, man.
Any time of the day is a good time to drink.
In Aussie culture, at least, yeah.
That's true. I don't personally drink that much because I just don't do too well with them usually, but I do like ciders. Ciders are nice.
For myself, I just go straight spirits usually and just mix those because I actually do terribly with cider.
Oh,
And just
really?
beer in general. Yeah, I'm terrible with beer and cider, which is a very un-Aussie thing to say. Because yeah, in most cases, people generally think, oh yeah, you're Aussie, so you're drinking piss. I'm like, nah, I'm drinking whiskey usually. Which
Yeah.
is the usual American solution instead.
True.
And thanks to another artist friend of mine, he ended up getting me stuck on gin and tonic, essentially. So practically, if I'm drinking anything just with zero plans, it's just a gin and tonic. Because it is one of the laziest things you can pour, and you can adjust it
true.
accordingly. To the point where I'm pretty sure I had a triple or quadruple shot last night because it was that bad at that point. But anyway.
Really? Yeah, I think that's pretty easy to drink as well because it's so easy to just prepare.
It's essentially just a lemonade, really.
Yeah, pretty much.
Anyhow, moving on to another one of these seeded questions. Any particular goals for the future?
Oh, I have so many things I want to do though. Well, I know, right? I'm that kind of person with like 10 million things I want to do. Surprisingly enough, that because I mentioned all my little kitty dreams, right? Like it's
Yep.
kind of funny how when I think about it, I've ticked a lot of those along the way. So it's kind of crazy. Like when I was a kid, I'll be like, oh, one day I would go to Japan and go to the events there, and then I'm gonna like draw a manga, and I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna work on games, and I'm like thinking about, I'm like, oh, I've done a lot of those, and I'm gonna visit all my overseas friends and like online artist friends. And I'm like, oh yeah, I've done all those too. It's kind of weird when I kind of think about it. Like you work towards those kind of things, yep. So as you know, I really want to make the whole visual novel or my game thing going on, regardless how well or how far it gets. That's just something of a goal that I want to do for myself as well. Yeah. So there is that. And what else? I really want to see how the whole VTuber thing, like where it kind of takes as well. Because since I really like how innovative and things, and of course now it's just like, just doing old streaming and doing commissions, seeing how things go. But I'm sure as things grow, there's going to be more opportunities or more like innovative ideas that'll happen. And I'm really curious to see where that kind of heads. And yeah, regardless of like jobs and other goals like that, I'm sure it's like I've always had this kind of vague sense, but I'm sure if I work towards it, it'll be like much more obvious and clearer at that time as well. Again, sometimes it's the timing, timing of things, and I'm sure in due time, like things will kind of happen the way it should be, and I'm sure you'll lead me someone a little bit better and more clearer, and I'm sure it already does already. Yeah, so it's a lot of things to look forward to. But yes, please help me with my Ultima game. Thanks. Bye. Like,
No,
I
sure.
need help.
Sure,
Yeah.
by all means. If it
Yeah.
comes down to writing, I don't mind helping people out, especially
Please
if
help
they're
me.
genuinely interested in it, essentially.
Please help me, yeah. Because especially I'm very novice and I'm not really sure how, since I've never really touched on that on game kind of side as well. So really noob at that. So I learn a lot from these kind of things as well. So even today, like hearing your kind of point of view and all those kind of questions was very like insightful for me as well. Because I love hearing people in their kind of like professions and what I could learn and understand from them. Even one of my another friend of mine in Spain, he works a little bit on game dev, although he always puts his work down a lot, but I don't know why, like he's like, I'm like, you're doing good, like you don't have to be, yeah, you know, like put yourself that much, but he is actually a really good proofreader, so he proofreads all my comics, and every time he proofreads for me, I get better and I learn from that. And it's, you know, it's just got those kind of things, and seeing his point of view of like I pick up a lot of kind of things, and it's just great. Like, so I really like learning from a bit of everyone and understanding different areas a lot more. Yeah, so we'd love to get some insight from you as well.
Sure, by all means.
Yay!
Anyhow, as one last question to just finish things off, and this one is usually the question I ask is like the second question for most other people, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Okay, so what inspired the design you're using as a VTuber?
What inspired my Well, one, everyone knows I like my silver hair characters, so that was a big one. Hairstyle wise was a mixture, because you know some people are very finicky about their design, like, oh, I can't decide, or like it has to be like this is it kind of thing. For me, it's kind of like, oh, how about something like this? Oh yeah, this looks decent. I question this so much. So silver hair for the win, yes. And there's a few characters that kind of inspired the overall hairstyle. One was I know that Elige is gonna laugh at this, but one of my favorite characters, Leon Magnus from Tales of Destiny, has one side part which is longer than the other.
Boy.
So
Tales
that's
of
why.
Destiny.
I love Tales of Destiny. Come on, I spent so much money on Leon. Let me be. So that's why I have like one part kind of longer. But I feel like I tend to gravitate a lot of characters that have that similar vibe as well. So that's why I did that. And another character that helped me inspire that kind of hairstyle, Promare, the F40, how he has like really flowy kind of like white hair. So okay. It was kind of like a mixture of that, right? Clothing wise, I've always been told my fashion was very extra and very wizardy, so and a little bit more on the fantasy aspect as well, but I don't like to go over fantasy. For me, in my fashion normally is quite interesting to begin with, like quite unique to begin with, but it's also something I can wear every day. Like it's unique but not like too out there. And I kind of try to keep that vibe, so something interesting but also something more like comfortable or something like decently, yeah. So it's kind of a mixture of those kind of things, and yeah. So, man, Tales of Destiny. I'm glad you guys all like Tales of Destiny or know of it. Tears. That brings tears to my eyes.
That's it. I will say, when I started the pixel work on your design for the loading screen, I was like, how am I going to do the trims? Or how am I going to...
Oh, right. Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah.
Because pixel art is a very different field of just what details can I bring out to make sure that this is identifiable but simple at the same time.
Definitely.
Because yeah, the size for the pixel art I work in it's pretty much Game Boy Advance size, essentially. It's to those kinds of specs.
Yeah.
Specifically, it was the old Fire Emblem style, essentially.
I see.
Which is
Yeah.
why I'm just like, man, how do I fit these details in? And just bit by bit, I was like, okay, so I've done a character with flowing robes before. How can I go along that? And weirdly enough, the hardest part by far was the hairstyle. I was just like, if I'm 1 pixel off here, it looks so awkward. If I'm 1 pixel off there,
It's like 1 pixel off, it's too spiky. 1 pixel off, it's too long. Wait, how does this work? Like,
yeah, that was pretty much the case. So in the end, it was like, okay, I have to actually go all in on one side and just be like, all right, I'll make that side very heavy in comparison, and that's how it ended up coming out. I was like, that's not too bad in the end. I can live with that. I can live with that. So
Yeah.
some other characters though, I was like, you have a gradient. My God, you're asking me to do a gradient in pixel art.
Cool. Yeah, because for me, my designs, like, I try to make it interesting. Like, I like detail, but I kind of want to make it, you know how, like, it's not so detailed to the point where it's like it's hard to draw, like hard to like redraw again, like that kind of thing. So I try to keep like some elements simple, or like my design style overall, not just for my own design, but just overall, is something that looks good and matches that character, and something that looks like someone can wear. For example, what I mean by that is like some game designs, they over design the characters,
Oh,
right?
yeah, by far.
Kind of like,
yeah.
why do you have like 5 layers? Like, that's not practical, right?
Yeah.
Or like, that doesn't suit that character. Character doesn't seem like they'd be bothered to wear 5 layers. Like, you know, that kind of thing, right? So I try to kind of match it, that kind of thing. So that's my kind of design style. Like, try and for the not maybe like minimal, but like enough to suit that kind of character.
Functional,
Yeah.
I think, would be the kind of where you'd go.
Yeah,
for it,
functional yet looking good is my kind of thing.
'Cause, yeah, myself, when it comes to my own personal fashion, is usually a case of I am one basic bastard. Just like, I am described at times as a bargain bin uncle when I go out, usually. It is usually some old rugged pair of jeans or chinos, a dress shirt, and maybe a coat on top, and that's all you're getting. If it's-
Nothing wrong with that.
If it's a party, I shove on a bow tie. Have fun dealing with that.
Just one extra thing.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Like, when people say smart casual or just go in semi-formal, I'm just like, I rock up the same every day. You expect anything to change?
It's so funny when you say it's like semi-formal. I recently attended a friend's wedding, and people were saying that I looked like I came from like like an ancient fantasy. Like, and I'm like, at least I look good.
Oh, no. 'Cause, yeah, it's either,
Like, I think they meant to say like a bit more like a bit more like period, like a bit more like that kind of older fashion.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but like it's kind of like they don't know how to describe it either. Because I like those kind of things, but more not so old to the point where it's like it's cosplay. Like I like to have those kind of flares, but still I can wear it in a modern kind of take. Yeah.
Fair enough.
So,
fair enough.
Yeah.
Because there is that feeling of when you get past a certain point of dress, it definitely becomes into that angle of cosplay.
Yeah.
Because
you
can tell a con is going on when you get onto a train and suddenly you see people
yes.
just a bit more fancily dressed than usual.
I'm just thinking like, I usually dress like that, but then I'm thinking, for maybe Smash and stuff this year, I'm like, what am I cosplaying? Actually, I think that I'm like more doing the opposite. Like, my cosplays are more casual. What is this? Is casual? Like, and I'm like, wait, hang on, that's more casual than my usual fashion.
Yeah, man. Yeah, for cons I normally just turn up in whatever I'm usually in anyway. Actually, no. If I'm helping out, I usually dress a bit lighter, actually. Usually a case of, if I'm helping my club stall out, then, I would have definitely dressed a lot lighter on those occasions.
Definitely. It is hectic to be in, like, more stuff. Definitely the life of a cosplayer. And also an artist table has been a bit of a struggle over the years.
The artist table, like the bump in especially, is like, it's rough as hell.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when you forget that, especially when you forget certain things and you're like, oh, yeah, I'll just pick it up from like the local store or whatever. It shouldn't be too much of a problem. So you go down to the Daiso near,
Oh, yes, of course,
Regent's
I saw.
place, and then
Yes.
you find out, oh, there's like a dozen other artists here looking for the exact same thing.
Yep. Sounds about right.
It's like, oh man.
The 6 on this bus must be a con on. I know, right? I miss it.
Because yeah, I remember one case especially where it was like, oh, everyone was looking for like cages pretty much, just so they could show charms and other prints and whatnot.
Oh, like yeah.
Yeah, and everyone immediately thought, oh, let's all go to Daiso. And
Ah, yes.
yeah, there were 12 other artists that I knew that were walking
Yeah.
through there, and I was like, oh man,
Well,
I need to secure this for a club, but these guys need to secure it for themselves.
and it doesn't help that artists
Yeah.
like let other artists know as well. Like, oh, there's this here and there's this there, and then it just becomes like everyone just goes to the same place.
Mm-hmm. It was
Yep.
a case of none of that group really knew who was actually going for it, or what people were going for, and where it was situated in the stall.
Ah, yeah.
And I was the first one to find it. I was like, I'll pick these out quietly.
Slowly make your way.
Slowly make my way. Sees a friend come in at the end of like the aisle, seeing me carry the cage. I'm like, ah, shit.
Yep.
I give a slight grin, then just point over.
Yep.
They give a knowing nod. I'm like, yep, it's gonna be chaos in this aisle in a second. Because man,
Got your work done for the day.
yeah, I was lucky with that one. And then another friend of mine, let's see, she pretty much thought that she didn't quite have enough merch to sell at her artist stall.
Ah, right.
And
Some people do like on the table commissions as well.
Yeah, it was a case of she was there on the spot drawing out a whole bunch of stickers and whatnot, just really
Yeah.
quickly. I was like, you're nuts, but at the same time, I applaud your bravado.
Sounds like the
Yeah.
sounds like it. Right. Yeah, the artist life. You'd be like,
And then she was like, hey, Ika, do you mind printing these out in the morning? I'm like, oh god.
well,
And that was
I never had to deal with those kind of scenarios.
that was me at 6 a.m. waking up, realizing, yes, I've got to go to the city and wait outside of Office Works for a while. Go in.
You see, I'm
Yeah.
the type that over prepares. So I already have the luggage all set and checked like 3 times and did a mock setup at home. So
Oh,
that's why.
Man, you do a mock setup. Holy heck,
Yeah,
okay.
because I need to know the table space. So how I could plan it all out, because that's why I need to know the table measurements. So then I could plan out roughly. So I know how to lay out everything or do like the setup. And then also because I have to cosplay as well. So I have like too many things to juggle. So I have to get that sorted too and have that pack that all like luggage and everything up. Yeah. So usually I have it like weeks in advance. I already have like a whole huge luggage case set up already.
Yeah, I mean, Smash is in a couple of months now.
Well, don't know what I'm gonna do for that, but well, table wise, but well, it'll be fun to see people again.
It's in like 5 months' time now, give or take. Yeah.
Plenty of time. I still have a lot of leftover stock, so I'll just like try and get rid of those first. Yeah, because I want to do like new stuff. Because as I mentioned before, I want to move on to newer things, and newer like collaborations, newer things, whether it be VTubing or collaborating with other crafts people or like projects and other stuff, and showcase those instead. So that's why I'm like, yeah, I'll just try and get rid of those kind of stuff. And
Fair
then
enough.
gradually change my path in that kind of way. Well, I've still got to sell stuff, but not as hectic as got to sell like all this at once. Yeah.
Hey. Oh yeah, artist market applications opened like earlier this week, I think. Yeah.
A few days ago, yeah. It's
Yeah,
like
a couple
2 days
of
ago.
days, yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like, well, here we go again. Yeah.
And it's portfolio based, so oh god. I've heard the struggles of some of my friends in past, and they were just like, yeah, we got in by the skin of our teeth, or we got in and we split a table
Oof.
instead. And that's
Yeah.
just like, yeah.
I feel a bit bad for the artists that are starting now, like who want to get into art tabling in this day and age, because it's so like terrifying, honestly,
I
intimidating.
mean, yeah, it is. It's like
Because
either, yeah.
yeah, like I started when like such an early kind of stage, like no one drew, right? So it doesn't really matter. Right. And back then, like artist tape was really cheap. They were like what, like $60 for like the early Smash days. And you know, or of course the venue and the whole scale of things is a lot different now
Yeah,
as
like
well.
it went from the Roundhouse all the way to
Yeah.
ICC now.
Yeah, so the cost and the scale of things is just a whole different. So it can't be helped that like those prices have to be raised. But yeah, like back then, I still remember like the things I sold. I'm like, why would people buy my stuff back then? Like, you know, if I was that skilled to this day, I'd be so like afraid, honestly. But you know, because back then I had the chance to kind of grow and try out little things, and I got so used to it that, you know, it's just a progression because things are so over time. And now it's just like, yep, same old artist table, here we go. But like I feel really bad for like the young artists who want to try but so scared of it, or like even trying to like, you know, collaborate or like table with a few people and all that.
I think the interesting place to look at this point would probably be zine fairs instead, because those ones are a lot more approachable because you come at them usually in a team instead. So yeah, it's still another way of showing off all your art and whatnot. It's just that, yeah.
At least nowadays there's a lot more like options for those kind of things. So definitely. Yeah.
Because yeah, I know for something a bit close to myself, my cousin actually participates in way too many zines for her own health, really.
Yeah. Because I mentioned that I did used to do zines before zines were a thing. So back then, before Twitter, before Discord, I used to do things on a Google document with like the dates and everything, and then I used to like message people for like amount of deadlines and stuff like that. So this was before like this became a mainstream thing. Before zines were a mainstream thing, I already did like 2-3 zines. One was Talk and Rambu, and one was Haikyuu before Haikyuu was even big. So yeah, like no one will remember me from the Haikyuu fandom now because I was way too early. But yeah, those were the two main zines I organized. But then after that, I kind of just did my kind of thing. Well, also because I'm like, I don't really need to rely on the zines because I can draw a whole book myself. So I don't really need it. And also now I don't join as much because unless it's a very interesting project or like something that I'm really keen on, or like people beg me to, which has happened once or twice, and I kind of relented. I relented a little bit. Because they're like, is there something we could do to get you to say like, all right, like it's one of those kind of things. I'm like, so it's all right. Just because the fandom, like the fact that kind of like certain fandoms really like my work, and I'm just like, all right, I'll do it for the fandom, like, you know, those kind of things, right? But also the thing is, because now that I'm more professional based, sometimes the zine is run by like fans which hasn't really had much professional experience with like graphics and layouts and stuff like that. So I don't want it to, that kind of thing, if they're not living up to the professional standard, I don't want that to showcase my work, because it is showcasing artists as well, right? Because essentially by using like my name or certain artist's name, it kind of brings the attention of the work. If the work isn't up to par, then I don't want to be part of that as well. And also at the same time, I do work professionally, so a lot of these zines I can only do at least for profit, or at least get something out of it, because I mean it's my job. So that's another thing as well. And also at the same time, I don't have as much time as I used to, and that's kind of makes it a bit tricky. Yeah, and I think like it's really great for artists to start out, especially meeting friends and like on Discord and stuff like that. But unfortunately now I'm so busy with like doing sort of work, I don't have time to make those kind of friends either. So yeah, which is a real shame, because I would have loved something like this in the early stages of my artist career. Like I really would have loved it, but now I just don't have the time to do so, which is like unfortunate. Yeah. So I think that it's a really great way for artists to try out and meet new fans and fandoms and such like that, and get some of that like experience. But now that I'm more working as a professional, I have to see it from more of a professional standpoint. I can't treat it as a hobby.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's a difficult thing to juggle. So unfortunately, I had to cut down like a lot. I had to turn down a lot of like zine invites this year. And I'll probably, unless it's something like I'm really like crazy on the hype train at that moment, yeah, then I probably like, yeah, can't really accept more, because honestly speaking, I get more attention for my work just posting online than in a zine. So it's kind of like, what is the point of me participating in it if I'm not getting anything out of it, whether it be friends or money or like a certain thing, like things like that. So I have to think it in that kind of perspective.
Hey, from the
Yeah.
cost perspective, anyhow.
Yeah.
No, that's fair enough, all in all. It's not a bad place to start for new artists these days.
It isn't.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's a really good place, I feel like.
Because I just look over at my cousin every time I walk into their room, and it's just a case of, you have a million zine goods and merchandise lying on your table. How many of these did you participate in, and how many of these did you actually buy?
Yes. Also, I feel like it's a good like for artists who's starting out as well to get used to like deadlines and like juggling those kind of things as well. So definitely.
Because it is most definitely a collaborative project that
Yeah,
you need
a
to
lot
oversee.
of work.
Yeah.
A lot of work gets involved in some of the zines I've been in, and it's like, to me, like even the scale of the zines I did back in the day was nothing like the scale of some of these zines are now.
Yeah, some of the ones these days are just like, man, this is practically a whole art book. What the hell have you guys done?
It's a art book and like a whole novel, right? Like they do
Yeah,
like a whole
yeah.
like art section and a fan fiction section, and then kind of integrate it together and
Yeah,
all
yeah,
these
yeah.
kind of things. And I'm like, Jesus, like that's so much effort. Yeah.
Yeah, they really do throw a lot into it. I'm just like, I normally ask my cousin, so how do you have the time to do this again? And she's like, I don't really. I just do it anyway. I'm just like, okay, sure.
Yeah.
That one is one absolute madman though, because yeah, she's an animator, so good lord, like full
Yeah.
traditional 2D animation. It's like, man, you already draw ridiculously fast as it is.
Yeah, that's
and
crazy. Yeah. Yeah.
And anytime I come over, yeah, she's doodling away on a tablet, and I'm just like, okay, you go for it.
Never rest for artists. That's the artist life. Yeah, I think only now I can only participate in zines if it's for profit. I think that's the only thing I can justify with my line of work now. Yeah, or unless it's a very interesting project. Like for example, one of the projects that I've worked with was like the GBF Grand Blue Tarot kind of thing, and that was a very interesting project. So I really enjoyed that. Yeah, so like interesting things like that, I don't mind. But yeah.
And tarot card projects always throw me off quite a bit, because it's usually a case of, okay, either because a lot of tarot cards are usually based around like, oh, all same art style, so ridiculous amount of consistency and whatnot. But then for like zines and collaboration affairs, it's a case of, are you going to get equal kind of stuff for that? And unfortunately, in that kind of community, for like fortune telling and whatnot, people do like having that extra level of consistency and just relying back on that superstition. And
Yeah,
it's like,
I agree.
It's on the rougher end, or it's a rough
Yeah,
sell.
that's why. Yeah, I don't use because I have my Grand Blue tarot like that I'm parting with. I don't really use it for because I like tarot stuff as well. I don't really use it for like much reading. I only do it for like a lulz kind of reading, like because like if I were to like in a scenario, what kind of character would it relate to, kind of thing, to kind of bring a little bit of that kind of thing. I took a playful approach to it. I don't actually use it like seriously in like the proper readings. So it's more like, it's in this character scenario.
Yeah, I'm not much of a serious reader myself. I kind of use it more of a party trick, really. That does piss off certain people, though. 'Cause there was, how does one put it? There's an Easter party held by a certain group of clubs every such and so years, whatever. And one year I decided, you know what, I'm gonna help out with all the planning and everything. All right, I'll do tarot readings on the side. I went through 70 something in that one night.
Oh my god.
Most of them asked either about finances or romance. If
And that
not,
sounds about right.
their exam scores, something like that.
Yeah, that's generally like 99% of things, right?
hmm
Yeah.
Now, the thing is,
Mhm.
if only the story ended there. The thing is, the second year around, I was like, you know what, I'll do it again. Why not? Here's the problem. When you do fortune telling once, normally you never expect to see the person again.
Oh.
So when you have
Oh.
repeat customers,
Oh.
they either come over to you, slam on the table, it's like, your reading was totally wrong, or your reading was totally off, or your reading was way too right. Please do another one. I'm like, God damn it.
Yeah.
That night turned into at least 120 readings because people
Oh,
because
Jesus.
people realize, oh yeah, there is someone who can read this kind of stuff over here, and it's free.
Yeah. Well, free stuff, like, no matter what, people will flock to it. Definitely.
Yeah, it was a case of no strings attached tarot reading.
Yeah.
Because being able to offer tarot services is usually about $15 for a 5-minute consultation. So
Yeah.
you make a dumb amount if you actually can get into tarot.
Ah, true. Yeah.
The issue is, in Australia, it is for the most part illegal.
Is it?
Yeah, for a lot of... If you do it out on the street, it is completely illegal.
Wow, I didn't know that.
You have to have your own establishment, pretty much. And then within that establishment, you must have the disclaimer that you are not psychic. This is purely for entertainment
For entertainment?
purposes, blah, blah, blah.
No
Yeah.
wonder people have that, like, under their disclaimers for, like, whether it's stores or other things like that. Because I saw it a lot as well. And I kind of got the gist, but I understand now. I see.
Yeah, it is a very specific clause that you are not allowed to offer one-on-one services on the roadside, pretty much.
Right. I see.
Yeah, it keeps scam artists away for the most part.
Yeah. Understandable.
The only exception, I think, is portraiture, but that's a grey line as well. Usually they don't allow portraiture in a lot of places as well. So,
I see.
Tarot and any kind of reading, specifically massage therapy or whatever, don't do it on don't do it on the streets of Sydney. You will get arrested for it.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know about that. It makes sense, like, knowing how many people scam people off, like, tarot or fortune telling and other things like that. So, understandable.
Because, yeah, it's the reason you can't... In a lot of other countries, you can just set up shop on the side of a street and actually sell stuff.
Yeah.
But in Sydney specifically, you cannot do so because we have laws protecting against it.
Yep.
Surprisingly enough, these fall under busking laws, of all things. Because as a busker, the only thing you're allowed to sell is 1 or 2 CDs of yourself playing whatever.
Oh, interesting.
You cannot
That's very specific.
You cannot sell any other merchandise for the most part.
Oh.
So you can't sell shirts, you can't sell jackets. It's just CDs.
Done it.
And
well,
yeah,
in this day and age, it's hard.
But yeah, any money you receive is purely a donation or for appreciation of your stuff. You cannot put it in such a way that, oh, you gave me this much money, request a song. So you cannot offer any services either.
Yeah, I vaguely know about that. Like, usually people consider things as, like, donations or gifts instead. Yeah.
Yeah, it's specifically outlined that, yes, you are allowed to collect funds as appreciation, but never for anything specific.
Right. I see. Well, learned a lot of different industries today myself.
But we went through a fair bit tonight, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyhow, we're reaching on about the 2.5 hour mark. It's a decent spot to call this kind of stuff, anyhow.
Yeah.
Anyhow, thanks for coming on. Was
Thank
rather
you.
enjoyable, I will say.
Yeah. Same for here. Learned a lot about, like, the different areas as well. Yeah. It's actually my first time actually doing this kind of, like, collab as well, so it's been good. So thank you.
Hey. Anyhow, let's see if I can't find anyone that I should be raiding tonight, or if I should just call it there and just end stream. Let's see.
Oh, thanks, Elise. Hope that was that was informative. I learned a lot too.
Let's see. Yeah, I think I'll just end the stream here.
Mm-mm.
Not too many people that I'm familiar with to raid anyhow. At least not tonight. Alright. And in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1, we're off air.
I see.